All right, so welcome back to Academic Plug. Yours truly, right? So, in this video, let's go through the 2023 History Social Sciences Term 3 Grade 9 question paper in revision for the 2025 Term 3 exam that you guys are going to write, right? So, in terms of the scope that was used on this question paper, well, the scope that was actually used for this question paper is the same scope that is going to be used to set the 2025 Term 3 exam for history, right? Social sciences. So being able to answer questions on this question paper will allow you to answer the questions that are coming in Term 3, 2025, right? So engage yourself, make sure that you try to answer the questions before we actually look at the answers, right? So the scope is based on turning point in modern South African history since 1948 and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights after World War II, the 1948 National Party and apartheid, the 1950s repression and non-violent resistance to apartheid, and the brief biography of Albert Luthuli, his role in the ANC and resistance to apartheid, and Freedom Charter to Treason trial, Women's March, the 1960 formation of the PAC, which some of you can call it the PAC, in 1959. And then finally the Sharpeville massacre and the Langa March, right? So if you want to check out the subheadings below these main topics, you can simply use the link in the description. Okay, so the link to this question paper is in the description. So navigate to it and open the question paper so that you can also download it, right? So before we actually delve into the questions, we have put together over 200 questions that are based on history, social sciences. So these questions only cover term 3. So basically all these questions include all kinds of possibilities in which one of the questions in there might come in term 3 exam, right? So we make it so rich in terms of like the content and the answers, which you can use to practice for the questions that are coming, and you will most likely be able to get a distinction, right? Because the questions that are over 200 dedicated for term 3, trust me, they are covering each and every corner of the scope, right? Everything covered on the scope. We have over 200 questions that are based on these topics, right? From the turning point in modern South African history since 1948 all the way to the Sharpeville massacre and Langa March, right? So we make sure that we ask you all kinds of questions using the context of this scope, and we make sure that you are able to understand how to answer the questions that are related to these scope topics, right? So making it very hard for you to fail. So make sure to go ahead and practice these to over 200 questions. And for those of you for those of you who are watching this video just before the exam day, well, you can also pull it off, right? So make sure you go through them. And we also have the notes, right? Which you will also find the link in the description for term 3 notes, right? So pretty much covering everything under term 3 scope, right? We have compiled all the notes that you will be able to use to make sense of term 3. Even if you haven't been taking notes all the way, right? Which I know some of you do not like taking notes. So it's either you lost your notes or you didn't write notes at all. We have the notes for you that you'll be able to understand the main topics of this scope, right? especially for those of you who are only preparing a few days before the exam. All right. So we also have this plug the history game. So this is a game which is based on grade 9 term 3 topics that are on the scope, right? So this is a sort of like a storyline which, you will see a lot of events that are part of term 3 scope, in which you'll be playing a storyline game, right? So let's say about the turning point in modern South African history since the 1948. You will have instances where you're able to choose whether to implement a certain act, or challenge a certain act and see what happens in terms of what the apartheid government, which was which was in power by then, would do if you were a black person and you were sort of challenging one of the acts, which we are going to also delve into in this question, right? So it's kind of hard to explain, but it's really fun when you play it, right? Because most of these things that I'm talking about, you will see them when you play and when you actually try it yourself, right? So this is a very fun game that we've put together, and it's available through the Plug app, right? So that's where we make available all the educational materials, from the question papers to the notes to the free textbooks. So everything is that we've provided to you guys is available through the Plug app, right? So also, we not only have games for history, social sciences, we have Plug the Tag. We have pretty much a game for every single subject except the learning the language subject, right? But for the rest, I mean, the EMS, we have games that are based on what you guys are taught in class and for each and every single term. So it's gonna make it easy for you to have fun and cram at the same time. Right? And yeah, it's really a fun game. When you check it out, also give us a review, right? And yeah, also talk about it. You can comment on the on this video to say, hey, the game, I checked it out and it's really cool. Who knows, we might have a little surprise for you, right? So make sure to check it out, and it's available through the Plug app, right? So the link is in the description. Before we delve into the questions, we have the $50 tutoring program, which for $50 you can get a tutor for history, you can get a tutor for mathematics without actually having to pay more. So simply for $50 you can get a tutor for each single subject that are listed there, right? So also the link is available in the description. Okay, so in this question we're gonna have to answer all the questions. So question 1 has 10 marks. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so 1.1, it says state whether the statement is true or false. 1.1, the National Party came into power in 1948 and introduced apartheid system with laws to govern South Africans. So you cannot answer this one without the note. So that's why I'm suggesting to you that you make sure that you download the note PDF, right? Which the link is in the description. So, I mean, you cannot guess your way into this one. You have to understand bits and pieces from the note about that context for 1.1, right? So the answer is true. But then let's see what CAPS AI says about 1.1. Okay, so just to inform you, for those of you who are maybe new to Academic Plug, so the way we deal with questions here is that we make sure that they are explained. So for 1.1.1, the answer is true, right? But then we actually use CAPS AI to explain to us why that answer is true or false, right? So we pretty much make use of CAPS AI to make sense of the questions and the answers, right? Because you will see that for a lot of question papers, there's only a question and an answer. So CAPS AI sort of bridges that gap, that knowledge gap, to make us make sense of why the answer is that particular answer, right? Okay. So 1.1.1 is true, right? So the National Party came to power in 1948 and introduced apartheid laws. So that is why that's true. Okay. So let's come to 1.1.2. Apartheid was based on racism, with the idea that whites are superior over other nations, such as blacks, Indians, coloreds. So is that true or false? Right? So we might as well just scroll down to the CAPS AI section, which you can also find, by the way. The link to this page is in the description, right? So you can pretty much do this by yourself also. Okay, so 1.1.3 is true. Apartheid was based on racist ideology where whites were seen as superior to other racial groups, right? All right. And if you have an elderly person at your house, I mean, you can sort of ask them like what was going on during that time, especially people who could be, I don't know, 50s, 60s, 70s. They have an idea of what apartheid was like, right? Just to make it relevant to yourself, right? You might find that they might tell you something really useful in terms of the history about apartheid and the likes. All right. So 1.1.3. Apartheid laws benefited black people than white people. I mean, we kind of know which one that is, right? I mean, that was not the case back then, right? I mean, we know that it was the other way around. Okay, 1.1.3 is false. Apartheid laws benefited white people while black people were oppressed, right? So that basically means the system, the government, and everything under the government was not necessarily um supportive to black people, but to white people, right? So it was sort of like white people were using the system to oppress black people, and the system was actually white people rigged the system for themselves, right? So that it can work for themselves, right? So if you know about rigging, I mean, rigging is basically, it's like a soccer match when the referee has been bought, right? To call penalties where there's no penalties, just in favor for one team, right? So that's pretty much like what white people did in terms of that time period and the apartheid laws that they granted, right? That they established. All right. So 1.1.4, the United States declared a apartheid as a crime against humanity. Okay. So according to the notes that you guys have, or rather, the notes that we have organized for you, is that true? Because all this information is there, right? At this point, after you've gone through the notes, at this point, you will definitely know the answers to such questions. 1.1.4, true. Okay. The United Nations and other global bodies declared apartheid as a crime against humanity, right? So this is sort of like the period in which now apartheid was sort of being challenged by external forces such as the one which is mentioned. And it was now just um looked as it looked as inhuman, right? Simply because of what was now becoming the norm in the world, right? I mean, oppression and such things were no longer, you know, deemed as normal things, and they were basically against human rights, right? So let's come to 1.1.5. Apartheid ideology said that dark skinned people or blacks were superior to white, light skinned people. Is that true? I mean, this question is kind of tricky because there's light skinned people who are actually black, and there's white people who are just light skinned by nature, right? But the answer is false, right? So let's read the reason why that's false. Apartheid taught that white people were superior, not black people. So, which basically means you could have been black and still light skinned, but you were not superior than white people. In fact, I just don't know. Like, let's say a white person whose skin has been burned and it's kind of dark, and then you meet this light skinned brew who could be colored, right, or even black, but really light skinned. Would they be superior to the black person whose skin is like burned up? I don't know. If you know the answer to that one, just comment on the comments, right? Just leave your comment there and tell us what you think about it. Okay, so let's come to question 2. 2.1. It says define the following terms. 2.1.1. Apartheid. And the second one is UNO. Some of you might call it the UNO. I mean, I know about the UNO cards game, right? But
Stop the cap.
I mean, obviously, this one is not referring to that one. And by the way, if you do not read notes, you will end up saying that this is a card game, right? So make sure that you go through the notes, right? Okay. 2.1.3, the UDHR. So we have pretty much explained this on the notes in depth. And yeah, by the time you come across such questions, you definitely should know what to do, right? Okay, so the 2.1.1 is apartheid was a policy or system that separated or segregated group of people based on their race, with whites superior to other races. The UNO is the United Nation Organizations, right? And then the UDHR is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So let's also make sense of this one using Caps AI. All right. Yes. Okay. So it's basically the same thing, right? But I guess the point which Caps AI is highlighting here is, I mean, you can see the bold text, right? So for example, for 2.1.1 is apartheid, right? So it's a system that then there's bold text there, right? So this is sort of like the main point, right? So when you write your answer, because you might not write it exactly as it is on the memo, but the marker, right? Your teacher simply wants to see whether you understand about segregation amongst people and based on race, right? So if you can see this bold highlighted point, you can sort of cram this one, right? And I mean, if you feel like cramming the whole sentence, because once you know that segregated people based on race, if you include that in your sentence, you will definitely get a mark. But you will also then come with a supportive statement, like making white people more privileged than others, right? But basically the main point is about segregation, right? Amongst people based on race. Okay, so when it comes to the so we have to give the name for the full name for and UDHR, right? Because these are sort of like abbreviations, which we have to give the full meaning. On the memo, you are gonna be given 2 marks just for identifying that it's the United Nation organizations. So it's an international body. Yeah, I mean the definition is thereafter, but basically you'll be given 2 marks for the full name of it, right? Same applies to the UDHR, but then the apartheid we have to explain what it was, right? All right, so let's come to 2.2. Name at least 2 things that United Nations organization wanted to achieve. Okay, keep peace among the countries of the world, promote human rights. Okay, is this? Yeah, this is the memo. All right, so let's come to 2.2. Name at least 2 things that United Nations organization wanted to achieve. So again, notes are very important, right? You're gonna have to cram these points, and they are there on the notes that we have put together. So the link is in the description. So 2 things that the United Nations organization wanted to achieve, right? Okay, there they are. Because it's 4 marks, right? So that means it's 2 marks for 1 point. Okay, the first point says keep peace among the countries of the world. Second one says promote human rights. The third one says improve living conditions in poorer parts of the world. Okay, so those are the points, right? And let's see what we can further understand them using CAPS AI. So the goal of the is to promote peace among countries, to promote and protect human rights, to improve living standards around the world, right? So these points are they apply they're basically the same points on the memo, but again, the marker wants to see what you understand about this organization. And if you're able to articulate that, bringing some sort of peace amongst countries, you can get it right. And it might not necessarily be 100% the same as the memo, right? But if you're able to articulate that, or the peace aspect in your point amongst countries, you will definitely get a mark. And also to promote human rights, right? And promote human rights, you can also word it as I think Caps AI gave us to promote and protect human rights, right? Do you see how it's slightly different, but it's still correct, right? And you can also say to protect human rights and still get it right? Because promoting and protecting is pretty much the same thing, right? Because you cannot protect something that you don't promote, and you cannot promote something that you don't protect, right? So you can sort of say to protect human rights, or you can say promote human rights, or you can say to promote and protect human rights. It's still correct, right? So, yeah, for those of you, especially for those of you who are just unable to cram um points as exactly as they are, just know that there are important keywords in every answer, which the marker is gonna give you a mark for, right? So another one says improve living standard in the poorer parts of the world, keep peace among the countries of the world. Let's see how Camps AI wrote it. to promote peace amongst countries. You can also write it this way, right? And also you can say to improve living standards around the world, right? For those, especially for those of you who hate writing or cramming long answers, right? You can just sort of use Caps AI and get a mark, right? So make use of this, right? You can definitely get a lot of marks. And I'll tell you this, right? Getting a lot of marks in school is not necessarily about how long definitions you can cram. It's honestly, this is about how many keywords can you put in a sentence to get a mark. So if you're cramming, look for the keywords, right? This is really important. It's going to simplify how you, because a lot of you think cramming, you are supposed to cram the whole book. No, that's not the case. You can just simply cram the key points and then come up with, words to justify your points. You can really get a lot of marks just doing that, right? So, yeah, all right. So let's come to question 3.1. Name the name of the document drawn by the about human rights. Name the name, right? Okay, so the document drawn by the about human rights is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Do you kind of see how these answers are also sort of recurring, right? Because we had to define what the is, and then we had to list two things that uh the United Nations organization wanted to achieve, right? So we're basically playing around the same topics, right? So, which also gives you a lot of marks, right? I mean, if you defined it once, and you know the document that they uh they wrote about human rights, right? Because now we know that the or rather, the UDHR is a byproduct of the right? There's no UDHR if there's no right? So you can just sort of take it from the and understanding more about the then you come to an understanding that they also had this document called the UDHR, right? The Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So that's pretty much it, right? And let's come to the next question. Three point two. Name three human rights included in the UDHR. Okay, so now we're talking about that document, right? So from identifying that document, now we have to come with three human rights that were included in that document, right? Okay, so let's go to them. All right. So the first one is right to live, right to freedom, right to work, right to education, right to privacy. So, like I said, in terms of keywords, if you really want to score a lot of marks, so I mean, we can see that the keyword, which is right to, is sort of recurring in these answers, right? So that now tells you that if you ever come across a question asking you to list any rights that we included in the in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the keyword right to is the prefix. Then you can sort of cram the rest, right? The live, the freedom, the work, the education, the privacy, right? And which I think is pretty much common to a lot of you guys, right? I mean, you have education, right? Because it was a right that was also declared in this document, right? So you can sort of cram these um keywords at the end because you already know that the right to is the first thing that you write. Then you come with a live. the freedom, the work, the education, the privacy, which makes it easy for you to cram this, right? Trust me, it really becomes easy because some of you might try to cram it by saying, okay, the right to this, the right to do that. If you just say, live freedom, work, education, privacy, right? Or try to play with it, right? Create some lyrics if you're a lyricist, right? Make it fun.
Boom, bam, bop, bada bop, boom, pow.
Okay. I mean, I'm not saying that's like the main go-to, but you can simply cram these ones, right? It's really easy. Okay, let's come to 3.3. When did you know adopted the UDHR? Okay. Now we are asked to name the date or the year in which they adopted that. When did you know adopt the UDHR? 1948, right? But also on the note, we include the month in which it was like officially published. But then it when it goes down in history, they recognize it in a year, right? Which I mean, here they are only looking for the year, right? If they wanted the month, they would have stated that, right? But for this one, you can just simply cram the year. But yeah, we include everything in the notes. We make sure that we don't leave a thing, right? We include the dates, like the whole date, right? The month. So that's the benefit of having the notes, right? So you can have the notes, which are already put together with all this information. And the link is in the description. So let's come to 3.4. There are 5 countries with permanent seats in the United Nations. Name at least 4 countries. Okay, there was some sort of a spelling error on the question paper, but we were able to understand what it was trying to say. So, and also normalize reading to understand the question, because trust me, your teachers, they do mistakes sometimes, right? Not all the time, but when you're reading, just so that, because when you know, you know, right? Nothing beats knowing, guys. So, I mean, especially if you went through our notes and you understand what's what, you will basically be able to identify some of these mistakes and avoid the confusion, right? I mean, imagine you were sitting in an exam and the question wasn't even correct. Like, you can tell the teacher that, hey, teacher, well, I don't think this makes sense. Can you confirm? Right? And then they will help you to say, oh, okay, there was a mistake. And then, you know, then it will point that you are really that student. All right. You are that guy. You're him or her, right?
Who are you?
You.
No, not me, you.
Yes, I am you.
Just answer the damn questions. Who are you?
I have told you.
Are you deaf?
No, you is blind.
I'm not blind, you blind.
That is what I just said.
You just said what?
I did not say what. I said you.
That's what I'm asking you.
And you is answering.
Shut up! You!
Yes?
Not you, him! What's your name?
Me.
Yes, you!
I am me. He's me. And I'm you.
All right. So let's come to 3.4. So the countries are France, China, United States of America, Russia, United Kingdom. Yeah, the UN, basically, right? Because on the notes, we also include the BRICS, right? I think you guys also know about the BRICS, right? But this one is talking about the UN. But then on the notes, we also talk about the BRICS, the countries that are in the BRICS, right? Which includes the South Africa, the Brazil, the China also, right? And also the Russia. So we have the UN and the BRICS, right? Which is some of you might confuse this for one for the other, right? So make sure that you go through the notes so that you're not confused if they might ask you about the BRICS, right? Because here they've asked you about the UN. Which other organization has countries that are members, right? The BRICS, right? Because also the UN and the BRICS, they are pretty much two different organizations that stand for different objectives, right? But that's on the note. But I don't think they might ask that in the exam. But it's good to know, right? Trust me, it's really good to know. Because when you're on point, you're always on point. Okay, let's come to question 4 now. All right. So 4.1 says during the apartheid regime, blacks were not treated the same as white. Name 3 differences that you know. Well, before we actually look at the answers, I'm telling you, for this one, I think even your grandmom or your granddad might have an answer for this one.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
They can definitely, I mean, I know it by my father, right? I mean, he lived in those times. So he used to tell me about people who were not allowed to sit on the benches of the same as the whites, right? They were basically not allowed to sit in the same benches with white people. So there was like black people's benches and white people's benches. Black people's parks, white people's parks, right? Like that. It's pretty much a lot of things, including the public toilets, right? I'm sure you know about this because you might have come across it through your notes. So let's come to 4.1. So blacks were not allowed to marry white people. Yeah, this is one of the classics. Guys, if you had like a white girlfriend back then, whew, you might find yourself in jail. It was against white people's culture, and it was against the laws that came with the apartheid, right? The regime. So another point says whites and blacks were forced to go to different schools. Yeah, that's true also. A lot of things. There was a very huge divide between blacks and whites. Okay, another point says blacks could not open up business in white areas, right? So you are basically not allowed to open your spaza in white areas. And another point, which is I was about to mention, blacks were not allowed to live in the urban areas. Basically, back then, blacks were not allowed to live in urban areas because who was the majority population in urban areas? White people, right? So you weren't allowed to be anywhere near those communities, right? So that's pretty much what it was. All right, let's come to 4.2. Name 2 apartheid laws. Okay. The answer says, okay, the first point says Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act. So what happens is that when the government wants to make something official, like people have to respect, and also the law sort of caters for, they make it an act, right? So when it becomes an act, that means now the government can enforce that act, right? To say, oh, so we made this act saying that blacks should marry whites, you have married each other, and you are white and you're black and you're married. So therefore we can enforce legal consequences on you. Right? So that's what the act is about. It's like the ability for the government and the police and the law to take action, whether they are saying do not marry or black people should marry white people. That means they'll be able to take action when that occurs, right? So that's basically what an act is. But we also explained to you guys what an act is in brief detail. Those were the laws, right? Okay, 4.2. So we read about the Marriage Act, Prohibition of Mixed Marriages Act. Okay, another one is the Natives Urban Areas Act, and the other one is the Group Areas Act, which we do explain in details. So make sure to go and download the notes, right? Okay, the last one is the Natives Resettlements Act, right? Okay, so that's it for question 4. Now let's come to question 5. So question 5, 10 marks, 5.1. You are appointed as a history teacher at one of Musina secondary schools and given apartheid topic to teach. Write a note explaining what apartheid was. Okay, so for those of you who may not know which school, or rather which area this is, so Musina, if I'm not mistaken, this Musina for any other Musina. So there's a place in Limpopo. It's called Musina. So it's the first township that you come across within South Africa when you're heading towards the border, which crosses over to Zimbabwe. So that's where Musina is, right? So in this context, they are saying you are within Musina and you are teaching in one of those schools, right? And you're given an apartheid topic to teach. Write notes explaining what apartheid was. So we explain this in detail on our notes, right? So you can just answer this question easily, but the tricky question is, how do you actually write a note that fit 10 marks, right? Because I'll tell you, even on the memo, there's 10 marks, but then the points that are there, they're just a bit longer, as you can see, right? So these are the points that you are supposed to write, right? So here's the cool trick that I wanted to show you guys in about how can you cram all that, right? I mean, this is a bunch of notes. These are very elaborate points, right? So how can you cram them? So there's this tool here, right? Which is the cramming assistant. So since you guys are in grade 9, and this is what you're going to be seeing often, especially when you go to grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. So you are going to be writing a lot of essays. So this is your first chance to try to cram something longer, right? And how can you do that? How can you cram something that long? The cramming assistant is here for you, right? I mean, this tool basically allows you to cram those points, right? And it's going to tell you how accurate you are, and it's going to tell you the hints that you will need, right? So I'm about to show you how this works. So we want to cram the first point, right? The first point is this one. Apartheid was a policy or system that separated or segregated group of people based on their race, with whites superior to other races, and then Apartheid ideology used skin color and other physical characteristics of South Africans to clarify people into racist groups. Okay, so we want to cram that point, right? So what do? You come here and you try to see if you can remember it, right? And this is available for Android users, iOS as well, and also PC users, right? I'm not sure if you can do this on a TV, on a smart TV, but it's basically available, right? Because you will realize that on your phone, when you press on the keyboard, there should be somewhere where you'll be able to convert your words, your voice into text, right? So as you can see on the screen, I have this little button on the right top, and I'm simply gonna press that and we'll see how far I go, right? So okay, let's do this. Apartheid was a policy or system that separated or segregated group of people based on their race, with whites superior to other races. Apartheid ideology used skin color and other physical characteristics of South Africans to classify people into racist groups. Okay, so here if you see an error, because sometimes you may not pronounce the word pretty well, but before you actually check the accuracy, you should first look for the typos, right? So as you can see, there's a typo highlighted in red, which I'm gonna edit before I let me do this before I check the accuracy. Okay, apartheid ideology. Okay, and I think this also another. Okay, yeah, this one typo I also noticed as I was talking, right? So you can do this after you've done saying it out loud, right? Because the key to cramming is for you to be able to say it out loud, right? So you're gonna have to make sure that every single word is there. Then you can go ahead and check the accuracy, in which is gonna give you the marks for that point, right? And then when you say out loud the next point, it's gonna give you another 2 marks. And then you do this for the other point, and like that it's gonna accumulate. The accuracy is gonna go up and it's gonna become green. This whole accuracy is gonna become green, right? So you'll see this when you practice by yourself. So this is a very useful tool. And also you can come here to click hint if you are sort of forgetting other points, right? So what it's gonna do is that it's gonna write the first letter of each word for each point, right? So that you can sort of recall, or okay, the first or the second point starts with A, then S, and S, then T, then O, then B. So let's check the second point, right? It starts with A, and okay, so it starts with apartheid, that's A, and it starts then following it an S, which is system, and another S, which is sort, and then T, which is to, then O, oppress. So it kind of gives you a glimpse of what is the first letter of the keywords that are in that point, right? So that you can have it easy to say, oh, okay, so it starts with S. A, that means stands for apartheid. S, system, right? Like that. This applies to the rest of the points that are there, right? So the more accurate you are, right? It's gonna show here that okay, your accuracy has increased or has decreased. and it's gonna tell you how many marks you've gotten, right? So this is a very useful tool, and you can sort of use it when you're trying to cram, right? Because this is long, really long. So you're gonna need like a cramming assistant, which you have right now, right? Which you can just start using. I mean, this one, you don't even have to type with your fingers, right? I mean, your thumbs might hurt after doing that. So you can just simply say it out loud, right? Which helps you cram. Trust me, this really works. And it's not only gonna work in grade 9, it's gonna work across all the grades that you're going to. I mean, you are going to choose subjects like economics, business study, even history, right? Talking about history, you are going to choose history. So you're gonna have to write a lot of essays. So it's gonna be important for you to cram. So using a tool like this is definitely gonna come in handy. You know what I'm saying? I hope you get what I'm saying. So the link to this cramming assistant is the same link to this page. So you will find it there at the bottom, and yeah, make sure that you use it. And I think that's it for question 5, because all those points are the points that are there on our notes. So make sure to download our notes and make sure to use this cramming assistant, and make sure to practice all the 200 questions, right? Because talking about term 3, you are going to be asked questions based on the scope for term 3. So here we include all the questions. So trust me, once you have done the 200 plus questions, once you have used the essay cramming assistant, right? And by the way, our tutorship program, right? So our tutoring program is just for $50, in which you will be taught history and especially mathematics, which some of you struggle. So you will be taught mathematics and other subjects for just $50 per month, right? Imagine being taught multiple subjects for just $50 per month. Because I'll tell you this, other tutors will ask you for $50 per subject, right? Whereas through us, our tutoring program only charges you $50. You'll get a tutor for mathematics, for history, for natural sciences, and for the rest of the subjects that you guys do, right? So it's really affordable. And I mean, once you have these educational tools at your fingertips, I mean, it will be very hard for you to fail, right? So I wish you the best on term 3 exam, and you should be able to get it 100% for this, right? Especially for questions like this. So after you've done everything, every educational resources that we have discussed, it's just gonna be a walk in the park, right? So go get those distinctions for history, and yeah, good luck on your exams. Make sure to subscribe, because we'll release term 4 revisions such as this one, and you're gonna have to be updated, right? So we do this before the term even starts, right? So for term 4, we'll be uploading the revisions before the term actually starts, so that you guys can prepare. So how can you avoid watching our videos just the day before the exam? You have to subscribe, right? So that you get notified when we drop these revisions, right? So make sure to also watch other revisions way before the exam even starts, right? So that you don't rush through the video and now you're just confused, you're no longer following through, right? So do yourself justice, practice way before the exam starts, right? So subscribe and you'll get notified every time we post revisions and other. I mean, we'll also be talking about how to cram in general, right? So a lot of you might not know how to cram. And I'm not only talking about the cramming assistant, just you as a student. How can you get distinctions, right? I mean, I personally, myself, I did get distinctions, right? When I was imagine when I was in varsity, right? So how can you use the method that I used in high school? Because that's the only way you'll be able to go to varsity. If you do well in high school, you're guaranteed varsity, right? It's not even a question. If you want to be a doctor, or if you want to be an engineer, whatever the case or the career path that you have an interest in, you're gonna have to be good at cramming. So we're gonna post some videos about cramming in general, right? And we have very entertaining ways of cramming. Trust me, this is it won't be typical, right? Trust me, it won't be typical, but I'll give you a hint of what I'm talking about. So just look at how you cram songs, right? How do you cram songs? It's because they're entertaining, but not only that. You have seen a music video somewhere, right? The visuals. Cramming is a very visual process. It's a visual heavy process. So we train you how to cram visually, because a lot of you might just look at this text, and to you, as far as you're concerned, it's just a bunch of black text, right? So we teach you how to make visuals out of this black and white text, right? To make it have some visual aspect to it so that it's easy for you to cram. So that's the end, and you'll definitely find the video about cramming on the channel. So if you finish watching this video, you can go ahead and check it out, right? So yeah, that's pretty much from this video, and I hope you've learned much and you've learned enough to now feel that you know what to do. The material is there, the resources are there. We have explained everything to you guys, and from now on, it's time to take action, right? Go practice, go study, go cram, right? And then get those distinctions. So I'll see you in the next video for other revisions for other subjects, right? So cheers.